All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Encouraging Truth series. First off, if you don't know anything about us, we would love for you to go to our website, which is right up here. It's womensbiblestudy.com. What we try to do here at our Bible study, since we can't meet right now because of the whole coronavirus, we're trying to videotape 2 different segments each week. Monday morning we come out with this particular series. We're calling it the Encouraging Truth series because we want you to be encouraged during the week with something biblical and something that hopefully will encourage your heart. So what we're doing is we're adding this to about 350 videos that we already have on our website. You can download our app, our Women's Bible Study app. You can watch us on YouTube or Roku. We have a channel on there too. So lots of different ways to access our Bible study, and we would love to have you join us to watch lots of different things. So anyway, this is our Monday morning segment, and so here's kind of how I want to start today. For most of us that are married, we have those times in our life where we really need our spouse to change their mind. So when Rob and I are having a disagreement about something, it's usually because I think we should do this and he thinks he should do this, and I'm pretty sure I'm right. Because that's just women. We're just kind of like that. We just think we are right all the time. But regardless of whether it's your husband or your roommate or your boss or your child or your parents, there are times in our life where we're convinced that God wants us to go this way, someone else believes this way, and you're just kind of like at this impasse. So the question we want to ask today is, what do we do? And so the first thing we need to do is, of course, pray. And that is what brings us to our Encouraging Truth number 17, which is this. Encouraging Truth number 17 says, God can change their mind or your mind. Now, I remember Dusty one time. He wanted something, I can't remember what it was now, but he came to me and he said, Mom, I really need to do this or go here or whatever he was thinking, but Dad doesn't think it's a good idea. And I really need Dad to change his mind. He said, what do I do? And I said, well, I think you probably should pray. And pray that God changes his heart or changes your heart. And it's amazing that God changed Rob's heart. And it was just a lesson to Dusty. It was a reminder to me and hopefully a reminder to you that that's what God does. Like, we really don't have to yell and scream and manipulate and try to change someone's mind, because God is really good at doing that himself, as we're going to see today. Now, the key to this whole lesson today is this. When we pray, we need to make sure that we have this heart. God, change his, or here you go, change mine. Like, we don't like that much because we really don't want to change our mind, but we need to be open to that possibility. And we really need to be able to be in front of God saying, God, here's the deal. I just want to go where you want me to go. And I want us to go where you want us as a family to go. But you need to get us all both on the same page. So change him or change me. And that's the kind of heart that we need, because remember, everything we do as a follower of Christ, God is involved in the midst of it. And we have to believe that God has a plan for our life. And sometimes that plan is to go the way we think it should, and sometimes it goes a different way, maybe how Rob thinks it should. So we just have to pray with that kind of a mindset going into it. So I'm going to tell you why you don't have to be anxious about this. Is because God is really good at changing people the way they think. And we're going to see that in lots of different verses today, but I'll give you an example. For most of you, if you know our daughter Cheyenne, when she was getting ready to go to college, all through high school, she had this one particular college in California that she wanted to go to. But she knew in order to get into this college, she would have to get really good grades. They were big on extracurricular activities, so she joined student council, she started a Bible study. She did both. She did academically well, and she also did extracurricular well. So midway through her senior year, she applied for this particular college. She scheduled an interview, she did all the paperwork, everything was done, and it was a waiting game. And it was a waiting game to find out in December where she would be, accepted into school, either somewhere in Arizona or this dream college in California. So one day at the end of December, she got a call, and she was like ecstatic because the school in California said, you're accepted to come here. So she was so excited. She was like planning on how to decorate her dorm room and what it would be like to walk on the beach and ride her bike and see like ocean sunsets. And she was super excited about that. And we just really felt that that was where God wanted her to be. But then something happened, and it completely shocked us. And this is what it is. God changed her mind. And suddenly she started having second thoughts. And she was like, I don't really know if this is the place that God has for me. So she started praying every night for peace. She didn't get it. She only got doubts. One night I walked into her room. She just burst into tears. And she's like, Mom, I don't know if I want to go to California to school. And I'm like, she's like, I don't know if I want to leave my family. My nieces and nephews are young. I don't want to miss them growing up. And so I said, well, when do you get excited to go? And she said, the only time I really get excited to move away to California is if she has a bad breakup, let's say with a boyfriend, or if she's having issues with her friends. And so she started realizing, like, I want to go out of state because it's easier to run away from my problems that way. And so she said, I feel like I'm running instead of doing something that I feel God is calling me to do. So when she decided not to go, we went ahead with the Arizona College. Within a week, everything was changed, and her new destination for college was GCU in Arizona. Now, with that illustration, it's just a reminder that God changes minds. God changes people's hearts. He changes how we feel. He gives us harmony in our soul. He promises that He is not the God of confusion, but instead, He's the God of peace. And all through the Bible, we see that God is the one who moves people in different directions. He literally changes someone's mind or heart. And to me, that is like one of the most comforting truths. And that's why I don't have to be anxiety-ridden when Rob disagrees with me. Because I'm like, all right, well, we're just going to pray and see whose mind God is going to change. And inevitably, a lot of times, He changes my mind. So that happens sometimes too. Proverbs 21, verse 1 says this, "The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. Like rivers of water, He turns it wherever He wishes." In other words, it's like saying, Rob's heart is in the hand of the Lord. He's going to turn it whichever way He wishes. My heart is in the hand of the Lord. He's going to turn it however He wishes. See, that's really, really exciting good news. But think of what that means. That means that God can turn someone's heart to stay in the marriage. God can turn the heart of that person who's hiring you for a job to hire you. God can turn the heart of a person who wants nothing to do with God to suddenly, I really want to know about Jesus. God can turn the person's heart who maybe has been stuck in a false religion to get out of that false religion. God can turn the heart of a person who is in a really bad relationship to like get out of the relationship. And God can turn the heart of a wayward child to come back to Him and come back to you. When our son went away to college, I think I gave you this illustration before, I can't remember. But when he went away to college, he had a girlfriend. And he really, really liked her. And so he brought her home to us to meet. And honestly, in an instant, we were like, no, this is not going to work for our family. She just did not fit. There was just something that just wasn't clicking. And so we tried to talk to him about it, but it really was an uphill battle because for him, this was like the war of a heart. Okay, the war was his fight with his feelings and his emotions, and there was honestly nothing we could do. We told him how we felt, we counseled him, this is not the girl for you. But in the end, we realized it was a battle we could not win. And the only one that was going to change his heart or mind about this girl was going to be God. And so all we could do was pray. And on his graduation day from college, something clicked in him and he realized, I don't think this is going to work. And he broke it off with her and moved home. It was so shocking, but it was just what God does. But He does it in His time, and it's usually not on our timing, but we have to trust that He knows what He's doing. Now, you say, well, that's great. I'm glad that happened for you, Lisa. But for you, you're like, my situation is hopeless. Like my husband wants a divorce. My teacher hates me. They're just going to give me a bad grade. The man who interviewed me, like it was evident that he couldn't stand me. My child wants nothing to do with God. My friend joined a cult. My house won't sell. And yet what we read from the Bible is this, that God controls all of those things. And he moves on the hearts of men and women. He's the one who restores love. He's the one who gives favor. He's the one who draws people to himself, that opens the doors, closes doors. So let's look at some situations in the Bible where this actually happened and where God stepped in and changed someone's heart. So let's talk about the Israelites. At this particular time, the Israelites were stuck in Egypt. They were working as slaves under Pharaoh. God decides it's time to move them out of Egypt, get them into the promised land. He sends Moses in. But we find in Exodus 44:21 what's happening here. Moses is going to go in and say, let my people go. And God's like, Pharaoh's going to say no. But look at this in chapter 4, verse 21. The Lord tells Moses, when you arrive back in Egypt, go to Pharaoh, perform all the miracles I have empowered you to do, but I will harden his heart, so he will refuse to let the people go. God says, I am going to make it. I'm going to change his heart so that he's going to say no to you. So Moses keeps confronting Pharaoh, and eventually, of course, after the 10th plague, they're getting ready to leave. But here's another thing that God did to change hearts. He changed the hearts and minds of all the Egyptians. Now get a load of this. Look at Exodus 12, verse 35 and 36. Now the sons of Israel had done according to the word of Moses. For they had requested from the Egyptians articles of silver and articles of gold and clothing, and the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they let them have their request. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. In other words, God said, I need you to go to your neighbors who are Egyptians and ask them for their clothes and silver and gold and earrings and necklaces and all of those kind of things. Now, who would just willingly just hand over their treasury of jewelry to somebody they really don't know? And yet God said, I am going to change their heart so that they will give you everything because you're going to need it on your trip as you're wandering through the wilderness. So God does that, and it's such a great reminder. Once the Israelites were out of Egypt, they came along a king, and they were supposed to pass through this particular area. But the king refused to let them. But look at this in Deuteronomy 2:34. Rise up, take your journey, and pass over the valley of Arnon. Behold, I have given into your hand King Sihon, the Amorite, king of Heshbon, and his land. Begin to possess it and contend with him in battle. This day will I begin to put the dread and fear of you upon the peoples who are under the whole heavens, who shall hear the report of you and shall tremble and be in anguish because of you. God says, I am going to make those people be fearful of you. I'm going to put terror in their hearts. I'm going to change their mind. Instead of going, oh, I'm not worried about them, suddenly they're going to be worried about them. And it's going to be because God did something in their minds and their heart. Look at this. But Sihon, king of Heshbon, would not let us pass by him. For the why? For the Lord your God hardened his spirit and made his heart obstinate, that he might give him into your hand as at this day. And the Lord said to me, Moses, behold, I have begun to give Sihon and his land over to you. Begin to take possession, that you may succeed him and occupy his land. See, here's the deal. God takes full responsibility for putting dread and fear into the hearts and minds of surrounding nations. Full responsibility for hardening King Sihon's heart and his spirit. And some of you are like, well, that doesn't seem very fair. Well, that's a lesson for another time. But today I just want you to be encouraged. And I want you to be encouraged that God can and did and still does today turn the hearts and minds of people. And if that's true, then he can certainly change your mind, your heart, your spouses, your child, your bosses, your teachers, whoever. God is really good at that. Now, moving through the Bible, we come upon another story where this happened. In the book of Esther, we have a man by the name of Haman. We meet a man by the name of Haman. There you go, that's better. Haman worked for the king. So Haman's a bad guy, so we'll always do this when he's the bad guy. So he worked for the king, and he hated the Jews. But he especially hated a man by the name of Mordecai. Mordecai's a good guy, Haman's the bad guy, okay? So Haman wanted to make sure that Mordecai was hung on the gallows because he didn't think, that Mordecai was giving him respect and all those kind of things. So Haman decided to speak to the king on the following day so that he could, he's building these gallows so he can hang Mordecai on there. But on that particular night, the night before Haman was going to go to the king was having trouble sleeping. And we say, well, was that a coincidence or was that God? Look at Esther 6:1. On that night, the king could not sleep, and he ordered the book of memorable deeds, the Chronicles, be brought, and they were read before the king. Now that makes me laugh because I'm like, a list of memorable deeds? Now that sounds not interesting at all, and it probably is something that he knew that the monotonous voice would put the king to sleep. But God knew that that was the exact specific book that the king needed to hear that night. And as the king was tucked in bed and he was listening to this monotonous record of deeds, he heard this man, Mordecai, okay? Mordecai had stopped an assassination of his life. And his ears perked up when he heard that name, and so he began questioning his servants. And he was like, has Mordecai ever been honored for his good deed? So it was that night that the king decided to give Mordecai, remember this is the Jew that Haman hated, and he was going to give him credit for the service that he had given to the throne. But because of this sleepless night and a miraculous twist of events, Mordecai was promoted, Haman, the bad guy, was hung on the gallows, and the Jewish nation was preserved. And, here you go, all the credit goes to God, who was behind the scenes making sure the king could not fall asleep on that very important night. See, that is how intricately involved that God is in every detail of our life. Now let's move a little further. We go to King David. King David gives us this great insight into the political agendas of all the countries in the world. All we have to do right now is turn on the news to see this political minefield. You've got all these other countries with, Korea and Iraq and Iran and Russia and all this crazy madness. And we see this nation warring against nation. And sometimes it's really hard to not be fearful. The world sometimes seems really chaotic, seems out of control. But here is why you and I can sleep peacefully every single night. Look at Psalms 2, verse 1. Why are the nations so angry? Why do they waste their time with futile plans? The kings of the earth prepare for battle. The rulers plot together against the Lord and against his anointed. Let us break their chains, they cry, and free ourselves from slavery to God. But the one who rules in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. See, God rules. And God rules the nation. In fact, God rules everything. And it makes me laugh to see that God laughs. When people are out trying to do things, he's like, I got this. Okay, we don't need to worry about it. We don't have to fear anything because he is in control of presidents and kings of this world. People are freaking out about the elections. I'm sure we'll talk a lot about this in the next, coming months. But people are freaking out, and I sleep like a baby. And the reason why is because I saw what God did when Trump got elected. Now remember, I love that Franklin Graham was out, and he went during the election in 2016, and he went state to state, and on the state capitol, they held a prayer service. And their prayer was, God, we want you to instill the man you want to be president over the United States. Now, he wasn't saying Trump, he wasn't saying Hillary Clinton, he was just saying, God, we just want what you want. Like, we want you to instill who you want to be president of the United States. At that particular time, nobody could have imagined it would have been Donald Trump. And the polls actually weren't really even in his favor. And yet somehow, God put enough people's hearts and minds to get out and vote for him that he won. To me, there's just really no other explanation for that, except that people were praying and God rose up this president for such a time as this. Now, For those of you that are Donald Trump fans, you are probably terrified right now because of everything that's happened, the coronavirus, the economy, the racial tension, and you cannot imagine that Donald Trump can win this election. And this is why you can't sleep at night, because you're just so terrified of that. But here's what you need to know, and this is why you can sleep at night, is because God is the one behind the presidential elections. And here's the other side. If you hate Trump and you really want Biden to get in, well, guess what? God can change the hearts of people to vote for Biden. Like, it just works that way. Daniel 2:21 says this: He, God, controls the course of world events. He removes kings, sets up other kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the scholars. See, here's what you need to know. If your husband, if your friend, if your parent is voting for the person you don't want to win, nothing you say, you can scream, yell, fight, write on Facebook ugly things, nothing you say is going to change their mind. So you need to pray, because God can and does miraculously change people's hearts and minds, as we've seen through these verses. Let's look at another passage. King David had a son named Solomon. Solomon had a very wicked son named Rehoboam. Look at 2 Chronicles 10:13. But Rehoboam spoke harshly to them, for he rejected the advice of the older counselors and followed the counsel of his younger advisors. He told the people, "My father laid heavy burdens on you, but I'm going to make them even heavier. My father beat you with whips, but I will beat you with scorpions." So the king paid no attention to the people. Here you have a very wicked king who was not about the people. He wasn't listening to wise counselors. He was listening to his friends. But look at what the Bible says. This turn of events was the will of God, for it fulfilled the Lord's message to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, through the prophet Ahijah from Shiloh. He's saying, look, whatever's going on with Rehoboam, I'm kind of moving him in that direction. I'm hardening his heart to be that way because I have other plans. And then eventually the nation of Israel will split, northern and southern kingdom, all because of this. See, there's always this overarching plan that God has. It just reminded us that everything comes from his hand. Look at this verse, 1 Chronicles 29:11. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness, the power, the glory, the victory, and the majesty. Everything in the heavens and on earth is yours, O Lord, and this is your kingdom. We adore you as the one who is over all things. Wealth and honor come from you alone, for you rule over everything. Power and might are in your hands, and at your discretion people are made great and given strength. See, that's just really comforting news to us, that no matter what happens, God really knows what he's doing. Now, once the Israelites made it into the promised land, they ended up turning their backs on God through years of disobedience. They would be taken captive by the Babylonians, and God said they would be enslaved for 70 years. So all of that happened. The Babylonians came in, hauled away the Israelites. But after the 70 years were over, they needed to get back into the land, the promised land, the land where Jerusalem was. So how would that happen? So God began to work on the heart and mind of Cyrus, the king of Persia, to make all this happen. Look at Ezra 1. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, here you go, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he sent a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and put it in writing, saying, "Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem in Judah." You're like, what? Cyrus, king of Persia? Like, where would that thought come from? Because that's what God does. Like, he does that. He puts thoughts, he changes hearts. Like, oh, that's a good idea to go and build this in Jerusalem. And then when he did that, he needed workers. So look at Ezra 1, 5, and 6. Then rose up the heads of the fathers' houses of Judah and Benjamin and the priests of Levites with all those, here you go, whose spirits God had stirred up to go to rebuild the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. Ezra 7:27, blessed be the Lord of our God, of our fathers, who put such a thing as this into the king's heart to beautify the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. Our last illustration is this one, and it's all about Jesus. How he says, no one has authority but God. Look what happens when Jesus is confronted by Pilate after they arrested him. Pilate must have asked him a question. Jesus stayed silent. So Pilate said to him, John 19, verse 10, Pilate said to him, "You do not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and I have authority to crucify you?" And Jesus answered, I love this, "You would have no authority over me unless it has been given to you from above. For this reason, he who delivered me to you has the greater sin." He's saying Pilate has no authority. No one has authority but God to move on the hearts of people to do what needs to be done. And that's why I always say reading your Bible is so incredibly important. It's an important part of being a Christian. Because what happens is we start looking at the world, the news, the landscape out there with the lens of God on. And we begin to see everything with a purpose and his purpose. And so I think our best bet is this: if we need something or we think we need something, we need to pray, because now we know that God is the great heart and mind changer. Here's the problem, I think, though. We've lost this God is really powerful mentality. We just believe that God is small and insignificant, and we don't believe he's big enough to change hearts. And we don't believe he's big enough to change someone's mind. We can't imagine that our prayers actually move God to transform a situation in our life. But after reading all of these verses, we realize that he is the author of any change that needs to be made. We need to recognize that any given moment, he really can turn the heart of that person with the resume. He can turn the heart of someone to buy your home, to love your home and buy it. He can turn the heart of the person to move past that destructive relationship. He can turn the heart of a teacher to give you favor, turn the heart of your spouse who wants a divorce, turn the heart of the business owner to give you work. Sometimes we just need to be reminded that God is that powerful. But sometimes we get discouraged and we think it's not happening fast enough. But we need to learn to pray and wait and trust. And really come to a place of saying, here's the deal, God, I want this. But more than what I want what you want. And here's what I'm learning. A lot of times when I wanted something and I would pray that God would change Rob's mind, and he didn't, I realized later that it would have been a disaster if I would have won that instead of Rob. Always know that we need to get to that point, that we trust God enough that whether he changes my heart or Rob's heart, and he can do either one, but we're just trusting him to get us to the place where he needs us and he wants us, and he does that by changing hearts and minds. And there's something that's very encouraging about that. So hopefully today you are encouraged. Have a really, really good week praying and asking for God to change situations. But if he doesn't, know that there's a higher purpose and a better reason for that. Have a really good day.